I'm just like, oh my gosh, so let's get the party started. Okay, so here we go. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Pause and Pivot, episode 0. This is Margarita coming to you live from San Antonio, Texas. And it is with such a filled heart and with such anticipation that my co-partners and I are launching this year-long invitation for anyone to join us to just begin to explore new books this year and to ask the question, what's possible if we allow ourselves to dive into books, to have the courage to show up and share in these sacred circles of sharing wisdom, stories, and insights, and to think about what are some big ideas and goals we might want to explore this year, and how might these weekly ideas from books, shared insight, and our own aha moments, where will that land us at the end of the year? So we're so glad you're here. And if you're watching the recording, we invite you to get started and just dive in with any book that's listed on the recordings. So we'll get started in just a moment by introducing some of our co-hosts. Feel free to settle in, and we'd love for you to be comfortable and just show up as is. So please grab some fresh, clean water or some tea. We invite you to maybe grab a journal or two, your favorite pen, maybe some scent if you're into essential oils to really anoint this space. So you can really just land here authentically, fully alive, fully present, knowing that we're creating this amazing, sacred space where we are enlivening this idea of embodied wisdom. Yes, we're going to talk about books, but what we'll share in just a moment is the magic and the mystery that happens when we actually share our individual perspectives, our insights, our ahas, and ask questions of others. And that we take it from just an idea and a thought process of books, and we start to actually feel it in our soul. It starts to stir our soul from within, and we become better listeners as we listen to the whispers from our soul. So, Archana, if I may, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Maggie. Thank you for the introduction, for the invitation. This feels like an invocation, frankly, and
Mm.
it's incredible to be here. And thank you, Colin, for being here. I'm just absolutely thrilled. I'm here in Southern California, and but I'm everywhere, and part of this, I think, is really and Maggie, your generous big-heartedness, and really, I feel so included, embraced in that, in this circle, and it was such an auspicious beginning. 0, I mean, really. And this morning, I couldn't help it. I'm feeling a calling, and of course Maggie's calling, but I feel like a greater calling. What is this greater calling? And I realized it was, and the image of the conch came to mind, the conch, which is a calling, right?
Mm.
Um, yes, and so I'm like, it's a call to show up in
Mm.
whatever way you can.
Mm.
Show up, but show up with heart, your
Yeah.
true heart,
Yeah.
true heartedness, pure heartedness. That's
Mm.
all this is, just pure heart. So thank you so very much. Grateful to be here as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Archana. And then I will circle back to how you and I met. But before we do that, I want to invite my very special guest. Oh my gosh, Colin! I'm so glad you were able to join us for this inaugural, this auspicious episode 0. Colin and I, gosh, I don't think we've known each other for even a year, but I'll tell you, my life has been changed for the better. It's been absolutely transformed by meeting this one human being who is just my brother from another mother.
Mm. Mm.
So we'll talk more over the following weeks and months, and we'll have Colin be a guest speaker at some point. But for now, I'd love to just introduce Colin, who introduced me to the pathway of using AI to connect with my expanding ideas, an impossible number of creations that I have going, and given me the gift and the tool to kind of begin to bring them all together. And I think without Colin, having met Colin, this right here would not be possible. So
Mm.
much more to share about Colin. But for now, Colin, please tell us a little bit about you and welcome to this circle.
I love that you invoked our siblinghood because that's exactly how I feel about you. That first day when we met online in another group, and we happened to get thrown together in a breakout room, just Maggie and I. And she started describing a little bit about her life, and I was going, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." After about the fourth, "Oh my God," I was like, "Who is this human?" But first, I want to just start off with, I love the energy that you two are carrying. Oh my gosh, I'm not kidding. I've had a bit of a day. Archana, my wife and I are caregivers for our two sons. Our oldest is 40, and the youngest is 35. And we've had doctor appointments, which are never fun for those two, and all kinds of things. And so when I saw your note, Maggie, I was tempted. I was tempted to say, I'm tired. I'm tired today. But after you two spoke, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I showed up." So if there's nothing else that comes out of this, I hope that anybody who watches this episode 0 says, "Okay, yeah, I'm in." I feel it because I do feel it. And I love I love that you invoked the conch archetype, Archana, because from my father's heritage is Polynesian, and as you know, the Polynesians use the conch shells. I actually learned to blow the conch shell when I was a younger human. So I love that we're blowing that natural horn and calling forth humans into this space. Um, Surprisingly emotional for me. So thanks.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you for bringing your beautiful soul. And like you said, showing up as yourself. That's what we're here to do, to be mirrors for each other and to create this space which allows us to feel or to remember what it's really like to be fully human. What I say, brilliantly and imperfectly alive. So thank you for being here, everyone.
Archana, knock it off.
I know. I'm just I'm sorry. I'm gonna just add because the thing is,
If there's
I
no
love
one's gonna pee
you
every
want to
time,
hear.
I'm not sure I'm coming over here.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. I don't.
No.
The thing
Eh,
is,
I'd
it's
love to I'd love to blame it on you, but as Maggie can
no.
attest,
By all means, blame it on me. Yeah,
it's not your fault.
happy to happy to
Mm,
invoke,
yeah,
and happy to
yeah.
be here. And so, interestingly, coincidentally, circumstantially, last week, what I shared, one of the first things I shared is that I really purposefully feel one of my callings. I'm being called to move the place value of caregiving.
Oh my God.
I've been talking to Maggie about this. She and I have been talking about this. And one time I was driving, it was like, I don't remember when it was, maybe 2 years ago or something like that. And I was driving and I shared with Maggie and I tuned in on the radio and it was a conference on caregiving happening with a consortium of mayors throughout the nation. And I was
Mm,
like, I'm feeling a calling. And I got on the phone with Maggie and I was like, Maggie, I feel moved. This is time to change the place value, you
wow.
know? So,
Wow.
so my God, I recognize, I honor your role, your caregiving.
Mm.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And I just want to take a pause and we're here to also create this pause. So the name of the podcast is Pause and Pivot. And so
Mm,
often in life we just rush in from one
yeah.
stage or state in life and move on without fully digesting everything, all the golden nuggets and all the the poo-poos that come along with life. And so for us to reflect and just in the few minutes here, connect on such a deep level. So, for anyone watching, this is what we're here to do is just show up as ourselves. And for you to just show up, again, you can just show up in listen mode week by week. We're going to go through a new book, but it's not really the ideas and the thoughts. It's the magic that happens when we show up. And that's such a perfect segue for me to kind of share a little story of how I met Archana. So look what I dug up. I found, since I've just moved my office from upstairs to downstairs, my husband gave me his office. So I'm like, woo, thank you. I found my notes from Clubhouse. OMG. So I'm like, this was June of 2021. So I'm not sure exactly when I first met you, Archana, but for those who do not know what Clubhouse is, that changed my life, right? And it was a space where you could just come in and create kind of two-way dialogue rooms and share ideas. And of course, what did I do? Pick books, right? So we did 100 days. So every single day, Monday through Friday, I shared ideas from one new book, which
Oh my
was
God.
incredible, right? Who can do that? But it was like bonfires. We were just encouraging with our insights and our shares and connecting with friends, new friends from around the world. Do you remember, Archana? They were joining from Germany, from Japan, from Latin America. And that's where I met Archana. And she came on like with this bonfire of what I called wordsmithing. Like one of her greatest gifts for me is the fact that she can take one word and just run with it and just like say how it connects to her culture or to her experience from India or New York, or her roles as a parent or as a producer, or different roles and ways in which she has shared her energy and talent. So I want to start by giving thanks to that experience and the connection that really connected us on this mutual love and really sort of a dharma pathway around wisdom, around embracing, understanding, accepting, exploring culture, and having the courage to show up and to be visible. I mean, we're here, we're showing up live. And like I said, brilliantly and imperfect, with that new lens of what it means to be fully present, fully human, fully alive. So I just wanted to share kind of that idea. I'm beyond happy to launch this with my thought partners here, Archana and Colin. You're going to see them through the coming weeks, coming months, and we invite everyone who's joining and who's watching and is considering joining us for this 1 year adventure. We just want to share in this one episode a little bit more about our stories, why books have been so important to us, why we're oriented around the concepts of embodied wisdom, why we are so motivated perhaps to come together in these sacred spaces and to explore ways that we can more courageously connect with ourselves, with others, and with what I'm starting to label as the most important relationship, which is the relationship with our future self in our becoming. So let me just share what we're going to do for the next 40 minutes or so in our time. We're going to be just sharing our stories, some ideas around how we are connected to books and wisdom. Then we'll go into a little bit more about the themes and categories, what to expect. So if this is your first time you're landing in this space, so I want you to know kind of what's coming up over the next 12 months, the open opportunity. And then we'll share the list of the January and February books to give you an idea of the categories and the type of books we will be reviewing. We'll also share a little bit of the why, why it's important to show up, to read books, and to converse about them. So we'll share a little bit of research on that. And then we'll just be open up to any additional questions. So let's go ahead and pause there. Anybody have comments before I start to do some shares?
I'm good.
Awesome. All right. So let's share a little bit about, why this matters to each of us. And it's a reflection on the importance of the power of stories, the stories we tell ourselves, the experiences we've had, and most importantly, kind of where we put our focus. Which of those stories do we want to keep shining the light of awareness on? And which of those stories are helping us to show up as our best, better version of our future self? And which of those are inspiring us, lighting us from within to align and attune to that version of ourselves that is the highest and best expression of who we authentically are? So, let me just start with a quick share of my story. And I've had so many books and so many stories on my connection to books, but I think I want to start with this one, which is sort of just my childhood experience. So, going back to when I was in grade school, I remember riding my bike to the local bookstore in Huntington Beach, California, where I rode my bike with my best friend Monica. And I remember getting on the bike and just pedaling as hard as I could. And I just couldn't wait. It was like with this anticipation of like, I can't wait to see and explore what books am I going to get this week, And it was just a time of freedom, a time for me and my friend. And so we'd go, and I would remember just feeling lost, like in a good way, like I just lost myself in the aisles of these books, like book after book after book. And I couldn't believe that you could just walk into a building and there would be this treasure chest of endless books, and you can watch videos and recordings. And I remember sitting in the aisles and just like reading some of the books. One of them was like Elsa the Lioness, one of those that I just loved, so dear to my heart, and anything on the Wild Kingdom. And I remember grabbing, like, you could take like 10 or 15 books at a time, and I would always get the max number of books, and I would fill my backpack and my bicycle basket. And sometimes it'd be hard to go all the way back home, and sometimes I'd fall off my bike because I was carrying these gems back with me. And, for me, I grew up in a very big Hispanic family, and I had a lot of freedom. There were no parents around, wink, wink. So when I wasn't having to do my chores or my homework, I remember the feeling of like that invitation to crack open that book. It was almost like those little sparkly words came up, and it was like an escape for me. It opened me up to a new world, a new perspective, new ways of thinking about the future and about myself. When I didn't feel like I belonged, when I was just so different than other people. So, other ways to just try and build that connection and find that joy. So, for me, the passion for books began really, really early. And then as I started to grow and go into high school and college, really books served as sometimes huge pivotal events that affected the course of my life for 10 or 15 years. And one of those books was Perfect Health by Deepak Chopra. You guys might note that one. And that changed my life. Ayurveda is now how I see the world, through the lens of this ancient wisdom. And so then another book, very different, was Into Thin Air, which was about the tragedy on Mount Everest, which was terrible. But somehow that got me to dive in and start a new hobby, to learn how to rock climb and climb huge mountains of the world and mountaineering. And that's where I met my husband. And one of the biggest books, and I'll stop here, but one of the most impactful books of late was reading Dr. Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. We're going to discuss that book as our first book next week, but it changed my life as well. I'll tell the story of that next time, but for now, I just want to pause and give a huge debt of gratitude to whoever invented writing, whoever started printing books, and to encourage anyone who's never really loved the idea of reading books to just show up and hear other people's stories, how their lives have been impacted, because it really can just take one book to change a life, to change a direction of where a life is going, to begin to spark your connection with your inner guidance system, and to, put your trajectory on a path of greater meaning and connection with others. So I'll stop there, but just to give you an idea of just the magic and power of why I'm so passionate about creating spaces like this where we can not only encourage others to read more books, number one, but to really dive in and explore more than anything this idea of coming together, connecting in these sacred circles of sharing. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my story. And so, Urchina, I'm just dying to hear maybe what came up for you when you heard that, or how were you connected to books and wisdom?
Yeah, Maggie, thank you. So much here, really to unpack and just enlivened by what you've just shared. I can also recall um, in, I would say definitely in elementary school, walking in New York City weekly to the library, and just that thrilling feeling of heading to the library, getting to the library, and then um, having that incredible access, right? And 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 I loved it was like a playground. I loved the idea that I could just wander and discover that magic of just wandering. I was free to wander if I wanted to go to biographies, if I wanted to go do something for school, great. But it was that pursuit and that discovery, like that magic, right? And getting lost and found with with books all around me, and that relationship, um, uh, it's that relationship of knowledge. And it has not been an easy relationship. My relationship with knowledge is not that, because they're often when, the egoic self is like, no, no, I've learned enough. I don't need any more. Am I still teachable, coachable? I don't know. I think I'm good where I am. I'm good. I'm all about applied learning. Well, I've got to apply what I've learned. And I think that's where I'm so grateful for this pause and pivot, because even this morning when there was that calling, I welled up because I started to, you know, do a deep dive into the conch. And then what does the conch, how, what's the significance of conch cross culturally as an anthropologist in my anthropological lens? And then I ended up at the Gita, the Mahabharata, about Krishna invoking, Arjuna, and that duality of relationship with knowledge. you know there's knowledge that I need to apply in the real world, and then there's this knowledge that I have in spiritual, right? My connection relationship with knowledge spiritually, and they are admittedly in conflict, because in my particular context, I'm still a householder. I'm the head of my household. I have to, the knowledge that I have to apply it with my children. And they're about, two of them are in college. One of them is about to enter the work world. One of them is about to go um, to college, getting ready, And so there's that. And I'm like, I have to, share the knowledge, all the knowledge that I have, my experiential body of wisdom, careers, and orient them towards, materialism, because that is my dharma. That is my role as a householder, as their mother, to orient them to the materialistic. And yet there's internally this dialogue where I'm like, no, no, but you need to also impart and share your body of knowledge, the wisdom of, everything you've learned through lived experience, right? Experientially, empirical evidence, my body, my life as empirical evidence. And how do but then at the same time, that's not material, it's non-materialistic. So it goes back to the nominal and the phenomenal. The phenomenal world is calling me to show up as a mother. The nominal world is saying, oh, no, no, that call harkens you to listen to that voice. So I'm in that process of finding that balance, because I think both that relationship with knowledge and to be open with my children transparently, be transparent, because I am caught. There is friction internally, because part of me wants to be, lean into and lead with the spiritual knowledge. My embody as a Hindu, not a practicing Hindu, still, figuring it out. And then the other part of me is like, no, in the real world, this is what needs to, where I need to show up as their mother. And, so there's the material girl, to go back to Madonna. And there's a material girl, and there's the immaterial girl. It's all immaterial.
I love
So
that.
and by the way, Colin, I'm working on a show, a one-woman show called Immaterial Girl. So I'm also creatively being called to do that. So anyway, thank you so very much.
Look out, everybody. That's just a preview of what Archana is bringing to this
Oh,
space.
holy cow.
Thank you, Archana. I just want to share one thing reflect on something you said was, there are times in life where some things just pause and we just don't have the space or the bandwidth or it's not the time for that. And I think, how many of us have gone years or decades where we just haven't read any books, You get busy with motherhood, career, it's like, and then you remember, oh, yeah, those little pearls, those little nuggets are there for me. And then we dive back in. So, you know, full transparency, we all do that. And so that's the invitation to just come back and explore when you're ready to go in and do that beautiful exploration. Thank you, Archana. So thank you for sharing that story, that brief glimpse, and through your anthropological lens, and your beautiful rich cultural history that you're bringing live with you. So, Colin, anything come up for you? Curious.
I want to turn the cameras off and just talk to you two for like 3 hours. Oh my God. I feel very blessed to be here. I am a child of rural America. While my father is an immigrant, indigenous native of New Zealand, a Maori, um, I was raised in a town of about 900 people in southern Nevada. We did not have a public library. We didn't have a county library. and and yet my parents inculcated in me a deep love for reading and learning, and there were always books in the home. There were always books, but also the thing that I remember. So there are a couple of things. One, you both spoke of your grade school years. I had a teacher who really it must have been third or fourth grade, and we had a contest, and she made a bookworm, and each the worm had little circles that made up the body, and every book you read that year, it added to the body. And there were only 9 people in my class, but the competition between myself and the young man who became my best friend was intense, and we read he and I read at least 200-300 books or something, trying to beat each other that year. Now, of course, they were third or fourth grader books, but that was the beginning of me just like feeling that it was a natural thing to consume books. Like, you should get a book and you should consume it because it contains so much. And then I love that you invoked your spiritual heritage, Archana, because in that rural landscape, and I was born into a family of Mormons. My mom, fifth generation, her fourth great grandfather crossed America with Brigham Young, and it was actually my parents' union was a function of her serving a mission in New Zealand in the building of the first Mormon temple outside of North America. But the reason I bring that up is because in that rural setting and in my own deep spiritual journey, my favorite books were scriptures. I read scriptures. I can still remember my dad in high school coming into my room one time and saying, "Don't you want to go do something? Don't you want to, And I was really heavily um, uh, involved in expanding my mind into the cosmology of spirituality. And frankly, I thought that would be my path. I was the oldest of 7 kids, and I was a big preacher in that space. And then in 1993, and Maggie's heard this, and I won't go too deep, but it's important because I was told that both of my sons were cognitively disabled at the time, when my oldest was 8, my youngest was 3, and my life had been pretty magical up until that point. And I, for the first time, was faced with something that evoked in me a desire to not be alive. That was the first time that had ever happened to me, and I was really struggling with it. And that through a series of events, my mom came and coached me out of the hole I was in and said, look, just give it a chance. And so I basically told the universe, you better prove that there's a reason for me to go through what I'm about to go through. And it that a voice, like for the first, after 4 months of just wailing, a voice came into my head and it said one word. It said meditation. Now, I was a Mormon CPA, and so that was not common. And that led to a book titled Meditation by Eknath Easwaran, a Fulbright scholar who taught the first accredited course on meditation in America at Cal Berkeley in the 1960s. And that book changed everything. And I consider him to be my Sat Guru, in that I found oneness. I can point to at least 10 or 20 more that have had such profound effects on me. But I, like you, Maggie, will forever be grateful for Gutenberg and his press.
Thank you, Colin. Oh my goodness. Just so much love and humble respects for you to open up and show up. I mean, just showing up fully, sharing your story, normalizing that, we're human and suffering is not an option. It comes with life. And really, what we are given is this choice of how we show up. And we're either going to hide from challenges or we're going, as you said, to approach them. And so, Colin, thank you again for sharing that. And it really points to this natural segue to kind of take a step back on this broader reason, kind of a similar passion that we both have is to look at why do we really want to encourage more people to read books? So, interestingly, talking about the state of reading today, there's an article from the National Endowment for the Arts at the Pew Research Center. They're basically saying that right now in the world, fewer adults, get this, fewer adults are reading books for pleasure than at any point in the last few decades. In fact, a significant portion of adults report reading zero books in a whole year. So this isn't about laziness, or lack of interest so much. They're saying that what's actually happening is that it's our culture, that our culture and our lifestyles are just changing so fast and changed by constant sort of things that pull us outward, all those constant notifications. Also, the ways in which communications are happening, more and more, they say, in short form content, like our beautiful iPhones, right? Or ding, ping, anything else that's calling our attention outward and in short, title only, right? What's going to stop the scroll and get our attention? So there's less of an urgency that rarely lets us slow down. So, anybody listening to the recording, if reading has felt hard for you, or if you've missed it but can't seem to really get back to it, you're not alone. This research is basically pointing to a cultural movement and that it shouldn't be viewed as sort of a personal failure. So that's exactly why we really felt to create this space. Number one, that 40%, up to 40% of adults in the US now are reading zero books. Have you guys heard that before?
No, thank you for sharing that. I mean, alarming, startling. And just to go back to what you said, Colin, Gutenberg is my hero. Is my hero. And why? And in fact, I took the kids to see Gutenberg, the Broadway play, which was hilarious. Amazing. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. We were in New York, so I was enlivened by that. And I was like, we're going to go see Gutenberg. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah. So here's the thing, going back to Gutenberg, going back to it all, the written word, democratizing access to
Mm,
knowledge, right?
mm, mm.
And it was meant, when we think about it, with Gutenberg, the Bible, right? And we taught, and think about it, we have the Bible, scripture, right? The point of that consumption was to be understood by default, interactivity. Because if you're reading something we're all reading, we're going to interact around that knowledge, right? And then
Exactly.
there's a container for it. And that container is community, it's cultural. It's you go to, it's your church, it's the circle, it's, you're in, and you speak in that language with your immediate, members of society, because you're quoting, you're alluding to, you're invoking, the context is, right? That consumption has a context here, and the shift that's happening culturally, and that amazing share that you posited, right? As far as, not surprising though, because if we're individually consuming this content, we are just really, it's we're processing it by ourselves. Very rarely are we ever interacting with that knowledge that we just consumed. And I think this is why, just to kind of come back to pause and pivot, which is what Maggie, you and I have been talking about, why there's such a calling and an invocation for us and for this type of podcast where it is interactivity, right? I mean, the three of us are interacting around our individual body of wisdom and all this amazing sharing. And by the way, I was so, moved by your share, Colin, that I just was holding space for that in my head. And I'm sorry, I was, and because what you shared was tremendous in that I experienced something like that and was moved. And I'll just quickly share. I had a startup called FunSeek, and it was an event based startup. And it started out locally. It started out with just local events because my parents had retired. My second son was in a preschool, and I learned that I was pregnant with my third child, and that was, I wasn't expecting that. I thought I had strep. I thought I had the strep flu, but turns out I was expecting a child, and and so I was in the preschool and I'm just picking my son up, and I was absolutely humbled by one of the parents there who had not one but four children on the spectrum, all the way up to Asperger's. And if I think I'm mispronouncing, forgive me. But and I was just in awe of her because she did not, in that immediate environment, everyone had nannies, plural. And she was by herself and she was managing. And I was just in awe of her. And I was humbled because I'm like, here I am about to have a third child, and I am scared. you know, um, I had two boys, and I was just like, how am I going to do this? Am I ready for this? Can I take another child? And here's this woman who's got four kids, no outside help, and they're all on the spectrum. And I was in awe. And then my parents were retiring, and I'm like, what do we do if And just down the street from the preschool, there was a place opening up called Jill's House. And I learned about that brick by brick being built in front of me. And that was a place of respite for families who have children with, uh, special needs. And so it was a place where parents could bring their children so they would have community. So the children could all be together, swim, have fun. And then the parents would get a break for the weekend. So all of this was happening. And I was like, I think I'm being called to do something. And I think we're all entitled to fun. And we all deserve respite, and we all deserve a break. And so I said, I think I need to put together a website, especially. And the mission is that I'm going to build a website for families with children with special needs. And I am going to build that website. I am being called to do this. I'm being called to do this. And then I called the person who had funseek.com, and I explained the whole story, and he was so moved, and he's like, you can have it. You can have funseek.com. And then I spent the next 10 years building a website which went nationwide and worldwide. So anyway, wow.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. And, it's important to understand the context of sort of the small, slow ways in which culture is shaped and changed. But as we probably have all experienced in the last 3 to 4 years, this is now sort of at warp speed, right? Star Trek warp speed. And with AI now here as our constant companion, we can really expect more and more of this sort of outward pull, what Viktor Frankl would call just being outwardly focused, right? Sort
Mm.
of a centrifugal pull outside away from our center. And so I can't wait to share more of that next week as we explore his book, Man's Search for Meaning, as we explore the amazing idea of creating and designing new ways to spend more time in centripetal leisure, meaning coming from outer to our inner, coming back to our inner core. And, many of our ancient cultures, our world wisdom traditions, and now modern research in emerging fields like lifestyle medicine, positive psychology, neuroscience, all these new emerging fields are pointing to the same thing. That as humans, we thrive better when we are present, when we're actually connected, have this felt sense of connection to our physical body, not just from the neck up, and when we are connected with others, with ourselves, being able to name and claim our emotions, and to also be able to interact and show up with others. So a couple more ideas of why reading still matters. So from the National Library of Medicine, talking about one of the three core bodies or categories that we're going to be focusing on our book lists. So every month we're going to present 4 books. And you don't have to read them all, right? It's just the idea of what is this book? What are the 4 key ideas that we're going to maybe focus on? And how would it impact our body? So our physical health, how we're doing that through evidence-based, research-based, as well as ancient wisdom. And then we'll also dive into mental fitness, right? Not what's wrong with us, but how can we aim to be our best flourishing self? And we'll share tips and techniques and guidelines for, mental fitness. And then spirit and soul. How do we do the art and soul, the art and science of enlivening these ancient traditions as well as modern guidelines for us to uniquely follow our pathways? And then we'll have an X factor for our 4th week. We'll just have guest speakers. We'll have a 4th category, what's coming up each month. So stay tuned for those every month. So let's, as an example of why reading matters for the first pillar of, body, physical health and well-being, kind of speaks to one of my favorite areas of the science right now, which is lifestyle medicine. I've probably shared with you guys that I've been a member, I don't know, for 8 or 9 years now of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And if you're a physician watching, I highly encourage you to go ahead and look that up and join. It's an amazing movement for the past 15 years that's leading to educate, empower, and train physicians to be able to guide their patients and their communities on the 6 pillars of wellness. So instead of just looking at disease, we're now looking at what is right with us and how do we flourish and how do we show up healthy. So what's fascinating in this area of physical health is that even as reading declines, the research from, let's see, where's this from? National Library of Medicine. The research is pointing to the benefits that we keep getting from reading. Studies published through the National Library of Medicine show that reading supports cognitive health. Now, this is really important, right? As we're aging, as we're seeing the baby boomers, as we ourselves are aging, and also watching our kids going into their formative years before their brains are fully formed, right? So it improves cognitive health in things like focus, memory, and what researchers call cognitive reserve, which helps our brains stay resilient as we age. Yay, more of that, please. And reading also strengthens empathy. Wow, really? Reading, empathy, and perspective taking. We love that, right? Different books, different worlds. As Archana was saying, everybody could read the same book. We all come to it with our lens, our beautiful, unique lens of how we see ourselves and how we see the world. So, especially when we engage with stories or ideas that differ from our own, this opens that beautiful treasure chest and shines the light on more of these new gems that we can then explore. So really, reading isn't just about data and information, and that can feel like a duty or a should, right? Let's stop shoulding on ourselves this year. It's really about how we learn to think for ourselves and in community, how we can embrace and understand how we feel. So identify, name, and claim those emotions, and have that courage to show up as ourselves and relate in this sort of growing field of connected community. So, in a complex world, and we are in that now, reading is really not a luxury skill. It's truly becoming more of a life skill. And the benefits really don't stop there. Um, More importantly, and the focus for Pause and Pivot is really this focus on the idea of mental health. I'll tell more about this story in our next segment when we look at Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. But for now, it's how does reading also benefit our experience of stress and this whole person well being? So, one of my favorite pieces of research comes from the University of Sussex. They found that reading for as little as 6 minutes a day can reduce stress by up to 68%, more than listening to music or taking a walk. Let me read that again. So, just reading as little as 6 minutes can reduce stress by up to 68%. So, you can do that 2 or 3 times a day, right? What an amazing micro movement or micro practice. And these are the types of things that we're going to love to learn for ourselves and then share with you. So each week when you show up, we'll be able to share tips for those that are joining us live. We'll share them in the link and you'll be able to then practice. And what we're going to do is invite you to just kind of think and pick one and then have fun exploring it. Share it with your kids, your family, your neighbors, your thought partners, and just see what is the best thing that could happen if we start to just put into practice some of these ideas. And so the underlying motivation for us is to really encourage more people to read as we have experienced the benefits of the books, to experience what it means to show up in community, where for many of us, like maybe all of us, and so many of people around the world, we are now experiencing migration and sort of an in-betweenness, right? We could be in between cultures. Having been raised in the US, I was really in between a Mexican culture and an American culture. Many other of my sisters and friends around the world and brothers have felt the same way. And how many of us sort of stay silent and do not fully express our authenticity of who we really are? We don't even know that because we're not being raised with our grandparents and aunts and uncles and the stories that they have shared and those following those lines of wisdom throughout the ages that connect us to our cultures and our wisdom. So if that resonates with you, if you feel like that's where you are right now, we invite you to join us every week and just see what lands with you and what the practice of 6 minutes a day can do. So not the whole book, not a whole chapter, just 6 minutes. So again, in a world that keeps pulling us outward, right? Spinning out of control almost, being pulled out. And with our beautiful technology, sometimes we can feel like we're just human routers, right? Cal Newport in his book Deep Work talks about that there's so much demand to respond quickly now, every day, reply to all now. Gets me stressed just saying that, right? But we can just choose to pause and say, okay, what's important now? And recognizing, am I out there? Am I disconnected? Let me just plug back in. So we can't wait to start sharing some of these tips, some guidelines, but to really know that it matters. Coming back to center, this centripetal leisure, just 6 minutes a day. What's the impact it might have on you and on those around you? So in a world that keeps pulling us outward, reading becomes a way of coming back to ourselves. And over time, over a year, think about that. Those small moments can really add up. Let me pause there. Anything coming up for you guys when you hear those research bits?
I have not read fiction, confession. I can't remember the last time I read fiction because it's all been just for practical, like, just I'm always uh, consuming for operational, purpose. How do I operate? Let me look at this person's playbook. What's going on here? And I haven't leisurely enjoyed reading in quite some time. So, and part of it is also because, in a class setting or in a book club setting, you interact with that, what you've just read. and that I just love. I think my relationship with knowledge is when it's, it's interactive and it's applied learning. So, yeah, but that's pretty amazing. And thank you so very much for, um, really all of that substantive, right? And the fact that reading is sustenance, right? We need to supplement. It's an important, that's the daily supplement that we should be taking. So thank you so very much for that. That's critical knowledge.
Thanks, Archana. I love that. And I just love your words. They're just like cookies to me. So thank you so much. Colin, did you have something?
It's funny, Archana, when you said you hadn't read fiction in years. Once I got hold of meditation, I read hundreds, hundreds of books, because I got slingshotted out of through a profound awakening experience. Got slingshotted into a whole new world that expanded beyond the religion of my youth, and I became exposed to so much wisdom in the world, and it was like a feast. It was like getting locked in, getting launched into this big, huge space with all these books of all this life wisdom, and I drank out of a fire hose. I still remember my wife at times, because I was handing out books. I was telling people, read Eknath's Warren, it'll change your life, and all this stuff. So anyway, um, I have only read a couple of fiction books, but I just reread the one book that I will read again and again. It's A Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein. And in my opinion, it's a fiction based on reality. But anyway, my whole point in even bringing that up is that what you were talking about, Maggie, I find it very interesting that the three of us have cultural roots outside of this country. And it, it I'll just finish up real quickly with this idea that I grew up hearing about this mystical land of New Zealand, and I got to visit there when I was 7. And everybody, because my dad was the only one of 14 children to emigrate, everybody else stayed at home. And in the few times that I went there as a child, it just held this space, this magical, mystical place in my head. And I realize now that it allowed me to accept that there are realities outside of that lived experience. You pointed to it, Archana, when you spoke about the material wisdom you want to give your children, but at the same time, what you really want to do is give them the mystical and the magical. And I just love that all three of us have that space in ourselves and can relate and know what it's like to say, your roots, your roots are not just here. Your roots are world encompassing. And I love that energy is here.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Colin. And that reminded me of the importance and the reality of a felt sense of place.
Mm.
When I was doing my grad studies in urban planning, we talked about, the importance of public spaces and how in many European countries there's that shared community aspect of it. And here in America, our public spaces are more around shopping centers and ballparks, and which are amazing, right?
Mm.
But when you feel that presence, that connection, there is something visceral. So when I went back to Spain for the first time in Jaraíz de la Vera, in the middle of Spain, um, is where I was looking at working and doing some volunteer work right out of college. But I went to Madrid and found the street that corresponded with my father's lineage, which is Velázquez.
Mm.
And I felt like everybody here looks like me, and I feel like, wait, I it's very familiar. And I even
Mm.
like walked differently and I talked with my hands, and it was just this amazing,
Mm.
almost like different personality. So I'm so excited to bring in the cultural honoring the culture, honoring ancestral wisdom, and the importance of how that is going to amplify and grow our ability and capacity to build on connection, authentic connection, right? So that leads to the last research component of that's really integral to our whole pause and pivot focus, and that's around the idea around reading for meaning and longevity. So in a world where we can live to be 100, we also want to look at what do those last 10 years look like? Are we sick and disconnected, or are we thriving and living in a blue zone like state with our family, community, and loved ones? So there's a long-term research showing that people who read books regularly, so if you're gonna, ump the ante, and not in 6 minutes is awesome, right? We saw that. But for people who read books regularly, even about 30 minutes a day, they have a lower risk of early mortality compared to non-readers. Now, no one is saying books are magic, although we three here say they are. But what researchers believe is happening is that reading supports meaning making. And we'll talk about more of that in logotherapy or the books next week. Reading supports emotional regulation, that sense of both self-awareness and the sense of sort of self-directed behavior. So we're more of the driver's seat in our car of life rather than just being pulled along. And that reading supports ongoing learning. And that is what we've been sharing here, right? Through different phases, stages, and states in life, we need different sustenances, whether it's different food, we're training for a marathon, or different times in our life where we need new information to feed us and nurture us in that career or role in life. So, reading basically all of this is linked to healthier, more connected lives. And as we look at some of the more books that are around lifestyle medicine, we're going to bring up those stats on exactly how having these sort of more mindfulness ways of choosing those healthier thoughts, emotions, and behaviors will contribute to not only longevity, but that health span, right? Being healthier longer. And let's face it, us three here, all of our community, we're here to orient to thrive, right? We are here to orient to thrive in our own unique ways. So that's my final share, and that's really the spirit behind this whole project. So as we get ready to wrap up, we invite anybody who is listening to join. Every week, we're going to send links for the new book of the week. We'll be focusing one book on physical or physical body health, another week on mindset and mindfulness, another book on soul and spirit, and then another week on the X factor, sort of current events, new insights, connection, coherence, consciousness, cultural related areas, so you name it. And we are always inviting you to join in and just listen in. Listening is participation. And we'll also be uploading these recordings to our new YouTube channel, so you can catch up on those when those get uploaded. So thank you everyone for joining in. We're reaching the top of the hour here. I want to thank my co-hosts and very VIP special guests, Archana and Colin, for being here to join us on this episode 0. And my friends, I'll pass it on to you. What stood out for you? What are you taking from our initial session and this opportunity to join together in this year to pause as we look at books, wisdom, and connection?
Real quick, that I was just, as you're speaking, I was just thinking of pause and pivot. I'm like, you've helped me to quite literally unpack boxes of books. So I, over the past week, since we're, getting ready for this, and I'm like, oh, I've got this book and I've got that book. And I went to the garage and I unpacked these boxes of books and I brought them in one by one. And I was like, oh my God, it's like I'm bringing back friends into the house again. And I put them everywhere. They're all over. I've been like stumbling over the books, but I love it because, I'm back and there. I mean, it's incredible. It's like this recognition, recognizing, recognizing the power of books, the power of reading, the power of learning. Um, so it's all of it. And it's really been enlivening. And as I said, I've quite literally been unpacking, parts of my life, of my being, because books belong in my immediate environment. They feed me, they feed my soul just by looking at them. They're reminders, and they're compasses, really. So thank you so very much for that.
Yeah, I can relate to so much of what you said. I've got books that I know they've served their purpose. I'm never going to read them again, but they meant so much to me when I read them. They're like friends, and I'll look at them and go, oh yeah, that was good, that was good. And this, I'll tell you, Maggie, you have surprised me. I was unaware of some of this science-based research that you're telling me. It makes me very grateful that I've been an avid reader my whole life, because it points to the fact that theoretically I'm going to live longer, and I'm going to be more cognizant, more capable as I get older and stuff. So yeah, this has actually been not only just a joy somatically, but pleasure to learn the basis of that expansion of mind. There's never a book that won't make you think just a little bit differently, even if the thought is, well, I'll never read that again. you know but yeah, it's just been a wonderful experience for me. Thank you.
And again, thank you, Colin, for joining in today. It was a wonderful joy to know that you were here with us. It was not a coincidence. This was meant to be. And as we wrap up, I want to share the list real quick for the next 2 months, and just kind of leave with this vision, this picture of what really helped to name this series, Pause and Pivot. So I've always been fascinated by um, pilots, and there's a story of the trip to the moon and understanding kind of when we make big goals and we don't reach them, we don't do the things we say we're going to do, we kind of get stuck in these areas where we just don't move forward. But we think of other people and other things that have happened that are really big, and you're just wondering, oh, they have all the skills, they have all the support, they can do those things. I can't. So to kind of lay the framework of the invitation for what's the opportunity, the potentialities that exist in this year for the next 50 weeks or so, joining in to just discuss ideas and books, is learning ways to pivot in those small micro moments, the 1% pivot, and how that's actually how big things are done, and how we can actually practice what in positive psychology is greatly associated with higher levels of satisfaction and contentment, which is to focus on the progress and to enjoy the process and not focus on that sort of elusive perfection or the completeness of things. So, with that in mind, the story of the lunar landing is said to say that as far away and as big of a projected goal as that was, the actual shuttle or whatever that spaceship was called um, was off track about 99% of the time. So almost every, you know, however often they had to recalibrate, they had to reorient. So, two things, right? They had to know where they were going specifically, and they were pursuing this hugely big goal, and they weren't doing it alone. But here's the important thing is to recognize that while they achieved the goal, it was with millions of micro corrections along the way. So in yoga, the idea is to sort of come back to this center, right? And in many ancient traditions from the Romans and the Greeks, it's the idea of kind of like the golden mean. So this brings some context to that idea, right? So instead of like really just going for big goals and then not doing them, or going for really big things, or having really bad emotions, or going for the super big celebrations in life and, really tragic things. The idea in yoga is sort of like to live along the golden mean, to sort of reduce the fluctuations in life so that we're always connected with that big star, that big goal, wherever we are being sort of guided through the impulse to evolve. So we're keeping that golden star in our sky, and that's what we're orienting to. So we're growing the skills and the tools and the techniques so that we can pause, get out of the craziness, the distracted way of living in the distracted or externally oriented lifestyle that seems to be so prevalent for all of us, right? And to know that that's normal for everybody. We're all being pulled out. But then one of the new skills for modern day living is to grab our attention, to be aware of what are we focusing on, and then to put into practice. Have that wisdom and put it into practice. Knowledge into wisdom is what we're focusing on, and the courage to take that small action, to not wait for when it's perfect or when we have the whole story, to just launch like we're doing here, brilliantly and imperfectly. And so in that way, our invitation for anybody watching is to just have in mind what is the best thing that could happen in 1 year if we sort of assume that we're on this lunar trip. We know where we want to go, and so we're going to spend a year just exploring what would it be like to just pause regularly and take out some of these ideas and put them into practice and explore which ones are going to bring us back so that we're in alignment and in attuned with this idea of that sort of like more, I don't know, radiant version of our future self, of what we are becoming. And the important part there is what is feeding that idea, that image of who are we authentically and who are we at our best. We'll explore more about the different ways in our work, right? In the way we connect with people and in the way in which we show up as an energetic being. So just have in mind that flight, the lunar landing, and how many times that took to pause and pivot, pause and pivot. We want to normalize that corrections are not a failure, that in fact, that's the joy ride. And when we do it together, we spark courage and we innovate with new ideas of how we can come back to center. So that's been a story that has really kind of inspired me to continue to read, to continue to be open, to share with people, and to listen. Because we never know where that journey is going to take us. And most importantly for me, it's how much joy can we bring to the moment as we just connect with each other and explore this beautiful ride of life together. So thank you, my friends, for that, listening to that idea. And so join us next week, like we mentioned, for our first book, which is going to be Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl. We'll be meeting on Thursdays at 12 noon Pacific time, which is 12 Central time, and 2 p.m. Central time and 3 p.m. Eastern. So in February, the 4 books are Love 2.0. So that's going to be looking at love as a physiological state. We'll be looking at the next week Molecules of Emotion, which is going to be looking at the scientific way in which emotions are in our brain and how they impact us and have that mind-body connection. Can you tell? I'm really excited about that book. Then we're also going to look at another book called Why We Sleep. Without sleep, we're not going to show up fully human. So we'll dive into the research and the science behind that. And we'll wrap up February with the 5 love languages to really look at sort of love in action for February. So we hope that you'll join us for one or all of those discussions. And thanks again to my amazing heart-centered soul leaders and thought partners, Archana and Colin. Thank you, everybody, for your love and presence, and we hope you'll join us again in a pause and pivot session. Thanks and be well. Bye-bye, everybody.